So if we have the first slide, I think is that is Site C. So if Site C were built, it would be in the foreground of that photograph. So this is the map that shows it. So in the sort of light blue, I hope you can see it. And Site C would be the third dam. And you can see at Hudson Hope, that's where I live. And then the location of the dam itself is up where the purple on the right-hand side, where the purple ends, and it would flood back from there. So it would flood two major tributaries in addition to the about 83 kilometers of the main Peace River, the main stem. There would be 83 kilometers, and then there would be two major tributaries, the Halfway and the Moberly, that would be flooded. The Halfway about 14 kilometers upstream, and the Moberly about 10 kilometers upstream. And then there are some smaller creeks and so on that would also be flooded. This is a photograph that was taken in the 1960s. So the dam, what you see is the Bennett Dam that's just been almost completed, but before they started to back up the water. And you can see the massive construction that was taking place there. It is a massive blockage to the river. It's huge. And I was going to say that the valley that that we saw there it's an east-west orientation, and that's huge in its value. It's unique. Most of the rivers, or most of the valleys, run north-south. That one runs east-west, and it brings in the warmer Pacific air across into the valley and through the valley, and that's what allowed a lot of the heat-loving crops to be grown in the valley of the Peace. Both the Site C that would be flooded is affected by the same way, and it also was true of the reservoir that is backed up here. So, and this is the Bennett, or the reservoir that resulted when they started to back up the water. And as you've probably heard about the effects on the wildlife and on the people there, the First Nations that were flooded out, they hadn't got information. Many of the families didn't pick up their mail regularly, and so they didn't have any idea. One of our founding members, Noreen Wark, was affected in that way. Her family lived out there. They didn't get their mail off, and the water started coming up, and they didn't know actually what was happening. They didn't understand. And there are many stories and pictures about the wildlife, the moose that were caught in the debris that was flooding, and that couldn't be captured. So we hope that would not ever happen again. This is the second dam on the Peace River, the Peace Canyon Dam. That's the canyon before it was flooded. I suppose if there are dams with lesser damage, that perhaps that one would be one. It's in a canyon, so it flooded essentially a canyon area. What was lost there, though, were the dinosaur trackways. There were many trackways, some of the oldest both dinosaur and bird tracks that we've seen. So this is the history of Site C. 1957, a flood reserve was established on the Peace. 1961, the BC Hydro and Power Authority was established, and the two river policies, the Columbia and the Peace, that was established in 2002. The BC Energy Act and the BC Hydro mandate was changed, and that's when, prior to that, BC Hydro would look into, it was their mandate to, their obligation is to serve, and they had to make sure that there was enough electricity. The mandate changed as a result of the legislation in 2002, so that they would no longer be doing the development themselves, and they were restricted to just operating on the two rivers, the Peace and the Columbia. And the attempt, we saw the beginning of the program to establish some sort of a private energy industry in BC. 2007, the BC Energy Plan, and in 2008, the long-term acquisition plan. 2007, we had the sort of the fundamentals of the policy that the province wished to go forward with, and that was culminated in 2010 with the Clean Energy Act. And that was the thing that, the most serious thing, in my view anyway, is that Site C and 10 other projects were excluded from BC Utilities Commission review, because always before, if there was some sort of a development that was going to take place, it would go before the BC Utilities Commission, and you had a chance as the public or your representatives, like the BC Public Interest Advocacy Centre, for instance, had the opportunity to go and cross-examine the evidence that was being presented. And then alternatively, you could present evidence, or you could have experts come in and present evidence, and then that evidence could be cross-examined by Hydro or others. And that, I believe, was a very valuable process, because you got as close, I think, as you could to some form of truth, because you had the opportunities to get all sides of the story. What's happened now is that both the long-term acquisition plans and the resource plans and these major projects are going before Cabinet. So it goes to cabinets behind closed doors, so there's no opportunity for the projects to be examined. And so in the case of Site C, when you've got the new price tag that they've come up with is $7.9 billion. So if you have say roughly an $8 billion project that you are responsible for, because it's the ratepayers that BC Hydro that take the risk, I would think that you ought to get the opportunity to ask some questions about it if that's going to be your investment and you're going to be on the hook for it, as it were. So that's one of the most serious consequences, I think, of that particular piece of legislation. So the Site C has been around for a long time. It surfaced first in 1975, and they did a number of studies and some investigation at that time. The BC utility hearings were held between 1980 and 1982. There was a ruling, and the ruling was that that Site C should be indefinitely postponed, because that the need had not been proven, and also that if there were a need, that Site C had not been proven to be the best alternative for that. So, and in 1993, BC Hydro's president, that was when they looked at it the second time, said that the Site C project was dead because it was too costly and environmentally unacceptable. So it's had a number of rejections in the past, but we're back at it now because it's being pushed forward again. But this time, what's different is that we don't have the opportunity to have public scrutiny, and we can't have, unless we somehow can change the mind of the province, and they would open it all up, because it seems a strange thing to accept just that the only reason that we need it is because somebody tells us that we need it, but we haven't had the opportunity to really check and see if we really do need it, or how much it's going to cost. Now, I'll give you one example of something that happened in the first go-around, was that BC Hydro said that there was this demand for electricity and they needed to be able to fulfill the demand. When we got before the BCUC hearings, part of that demand was they have an obligation to serve, and they had inquiries from 10 different aluminum companies, and aluminum is a big user of electricity. So they had prepared as though each one of those projects would go ahead. But under cross-examination and bringing in evidence from the aluminum industry, it turned out that, well, if one of those projects, if one of those 10 went, then the other 9 were not economic. So it wasn't necessary to prepare enough electricity to serve all 10. So those are the kinds of things that I think you can bring out under cross-examination. It would be nice if we had the opportunity to do that.